your source for everything paranormal. Para X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meet and merry part, bright the cheeks and warm the heart, but tread the circle thrice about to keep unwelcome spirits out. Bide within the law you must, in perfect love and perfect trust. Mind the threefold laws you should, 3 times bad and 3 times good. These 8 words the read fulfill, and ye harm none, do what ye will.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Well, merry meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Tonight we're going to be talking about elemental witchcraft with my guest, Salicrow. Now, she is a witch, a druid, a natural psychic medium, who weaves the traditions of her Irish traveler and Blackfoot heritage with modern magical techniques. With more than 30 years of professional experience in the psychic arts as a spirit channel and seer, she often reads for individual groups and teaches workshops throughout the United States and internationally as well. Now, those of you listening in live, you're well acquainted with the fact that you can ask the guest questions during the show by sending me a private message or type it in chat and hope that I see it before it slips away, in which case, send me a message in private chat. Those listening live and not here, it's not too late to join us, and we're here at paraxradionetwork.com. Now, the title of Salicrow's book is The Path of Elemental Witchcraft, a Weird Woman's Book of Shadows. And as usual, there is lots to talk about in the next hour, so I'm going to shut up. Salicrow, come in and join us.
Thank you for having me, Marla. I'm happy to be here tonight and share about my book and elemental witchcraft.
It's a great book. You know, it's one of those books, I mean, it's a thick book, but still, it's very heavy, and the print is kind of small. So, I mean, there is so much in there. I can't even tell everybody. You know, it's just amazingly good. But first off, there might be some people who are wondering about Weird Woman's Book of Shadows. So can you explain the word weird as opposed to the weird that we're used to?
Sure. Weird, spelt W-Y-R-D, is basically means connected to fate. And when we think of the Wyrd sisters, the Norns, we're talking about these weavers of fate, people who measure, kind of like look at people's lives and determine where they go. I've always thought of myself as a weird person because I spend a lot of time in looking into the unknown. I've been a practicing psychic for most of my adult life. So that has given me this perspective. So when I'm talking about weird, I'm talking about, and most people who are interested in witchcraft are a little bit weird. We work more in depth with our own personal fate than a lot of other people might.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Well, you know what? This is also a book of your personal book of shadows. And
I'm the weird woman.
And, you know, it's to be used as a guide to connect with the magic of each of the 4 elements, water, earth, air, and fire. And somebody sent me a question for you on Facebook during the week when they saw the banner. And they wondered what the difference is between a book of shadows and a grimoire.
Ooh, well, there's actually not a lot of difference. Probably your own background in magic, what school of magic you've studied under. A book of shadows is a book of spells. It is a book of magical experiences we've had. I think of the book of shadows as being more of a combination of a journal and a grimoire. than where grimoire is usually just the spells without a lot of details on, oh, and this is how this turned out for me, and this was my experience with it. A Book of Shadows goes a little more into details about what the person experienced themselves through their spell work, through their divination. But it's not quite a journal, because a journal can kind of be a little bit more like a diary, and we can really work through some of our emotions in it. But so I think of like a Book of Shadows as being like a college journal, like something that here's my studying I did and here's my interpretation of the experience.
Okay, good explanation. Now, you suggest that the book should be read from start to finish, and it's your desire that the book should be marked up and tagged and dog-eared and coffee-stained from the sheer amount of use it gets. And right before I read that comment in the book, I was kind of annoyed at myself because I was reading and eating, and I did stain the book with enchilada sauce. So I think, does that count?
That does. That's excellent.
Good. All right. So I was off to a good start.
Yes, you're blessing it.
There, yeah, and it was spicy, and you have spicy stuff in there too, so it kind of spicy. Kind of works. All right. So, what can readers expect to find in the book? And I'm asking that in kind of a facetious way, because the question should be, what cannot be found in the book? Yeah. That would be so much easier to answer. Seems like you've covered all bases, and there's kind of nothing that you've left out, huh?
Well, I have a lot to say. So I have another book coming out next summer already with the publishers on death and dying. So obviously I left some things out. But what I would like to say is that the book is meant to, somebody could use it as a standalone book, and it was the only book of magic they were using, and they could engage in a complete understanding of a magical practice. But it also is meant to be complementary to other forms of magic that people might study. And I do feel like, what can they expect? One of the things that's in each, so I broke the book down. I first was writing a book about water magic, and when I sent it to my publisher, I told them that I thought that it should be part of a 4-part series, that there's not just one element, but I have a really close relationship with water. Mm-hmm. And so they liked the idea, but they wanted me to put it all in one book. So I actually wrote that book in 6 months.
Wow.
So you've seen how big it is.
Mm-hmm.
But each of the elements have their own book. So there's a water witch, earth witch, air witch, fire witch. It's divided into 4 books. And in all 4 of those, with each element, you can find things on healing, things on divination, and things on communication and protection. And then there's a couple of different ones in each of the elements, like, glamour magic I cover in water, I cover sex magic in fire, and the astral realm, like working with the astral plane in mm-hmm. air, and geomancy in earth. Those are very much more specific to a particular element.
Yeah, and I kind of, got the back of the book thing, and I'm going to elaborate a little further because, it's so interesting. Okay, so for the water witch, and I might be repeating a couple of things you said, sure. But she explores scrying and engaging with the undines and weather protection and fairy glamour and healing with kitchen spells. And for the Earth Witch, she describes reading bones, animal messages, listening to plants, crystal grids, and shadow work. The Air Witch looks at communicating with the sylphs and crows, divination through clouds and wind, sonic magic and healing, spell accelerants, and smudging. And for the Fire Witch, it examines the Djinn, the magical hearth, fire divination, candlework, sex magic. So, every chapter has so much in it that you just reading that, I can pick out 9 out of 10 that I just want to open the book again and read because they're so interesting. But one of the terms that I'm not familiar with was sonic magic. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so I've been a sound healer for the last 20 years. And actually, I wrote about it in my first book, Jump Girl, which was Jump Girl, The Initiation and Art of a Spirit Speaker, which was a memoir.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a major opening when I was 30. I've been working, I mean, my grandmother, great-grandmother was a medicine woman who people in town came to. So I've done this my whole life. I've professionally worked since I was 18. When I was about 30, I had a major opening to spirit, and which I completely remembered a lifetime that I had in Egypt. And in that lifetime, I did vocal toning and my magic and in my healing. And so I kind of was like, well, if I could do that then, I must be able to do it now. So I was doing it for about 6 months on my own before I came across a sound healing conference where people were doing vocal toning, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't make it up. Like, woohoo. But I use sound, particularly vocal sound, in magic a lot. And so I talk about things like sacred singing, which we've all kind of done when we were kids, when we just let ourselves go and we're singing kind of like in a trance state.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, like I said, I'm a Reiki master in 6 schools of Reiki. I have been working as a healer since I was about 28 years old. And I'm 50 now. So I've had a lot of experience in using those things. But sonic magic is really particularly the use of the voice, not just in toning, but throwing our voice, which is kind of like the weirding way, like from Dune, like the ability to put energy into our voice so that we can use it, like if we need to command a situation, all sorts of stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's just an amazing amount of things in there that are so interesting to me that I would not have thought about, and I think the readers are going to say the same thing when they get the book. Got another chat room question, going back to talking about the Book of Shadows. Is it better if you get a book with blank pages and then write in it, or is it now okay to keep your book of magic on your computer?
Oh, no, I think that's okay, too. I guess that I just should have heard the whole question. A lot of I have a bunch of apprentices that I've had, and they like to use their phone. Mm-hmm. And they like to keep their information in their notes on their phone, and then you can also take pictures. And I do that sometimes, too. Mm-hmm. I like to write in a book. For me, it definitely adds something to it because I like to do a lot of my magical work almost in the complete darkness or like with just a candlelight or whatever. And I can still write in my pen and paper kind of way that in that form. But, and you can take your book into the woods with you. And I'm an elemental witch. So, I definitely use a computer a lot because I've written a few books. But I tell people that feel what's right for you. But if you really want to go deep with it, you might want to be doing it in multiple ways, like having that Book of Shadows that's physical and using your phone for when you're kind of like not in a place where you have something magical happen. It's more spontaneous and you don't happen to have that book with you. You've got your phone with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good idea. It's just that some people are saying, well, no, technology ruins all that stuff, but I kind of think it doesn't.
I disagree. I think that it is another, symbolism as a technology. I think about I actually think the technology has helped a lot of people to open up to their understanding of, maybe how we're all connected, because we now have the internet, so we can be having this conversation, you and I, and I'm assuming you're probably in California or something, mm-hmm. 3 hours behind me. I'm in Vermont, mm-hmm. and we all now think that that's perfectly normal. So that's one step away from being able to hear our ancestral spirits or our, the elemental beings that are around us, because now our consciousness does believe it's possible that information can be found anywhere and that we can communicate with people no matter where we're at.
Mm-hmm. And I was talking to a channeler at one point, and you are as well. And she channeled specifically doing like an automatic writing, but on the computer. She didn't do the old-fashioned, the old school way.
No,
And
especially if the spirit has died within, a time period where they would have used computers, they are more likely to want to do automatic writing with a typewriter than with a pen and paper because they're used to typing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I heard that, one day I had nothing better to do, so I sat down in front of the computer and opened up Word and, had a blank document and just wanted to see if something came out, and it did. I mean, interestingly enough. And some people say, well, no, because, there's a ghost in the machine, and that's really bad. But then, when people used to do the old school automatic writing, people thought that they were being possessed anyway, so.
Exactly.
Can't win for losing.
Find what's comfortable for them. I love nature, but I also really appreciate technology. Mm-hmm. And I use technology in nature. Like one of my favorite apps is Picture This, and you can literally take a picture of any plant and it will pop up and tell you what that plant is and give you information about the plant. And then if it doesn't necessarily give you magical information about the plant, but you now know what the name of the plant is. You can now look, all you guys do is type in that name in symbology, and you're going to find a bunch of information about it.
Yeah, I've got Plant Snap, which isn't quite as good, but, I take it when I go to get plants or if I pick up something on the side of the road or whatever. And it's really nice. It gives you the basics. I mean, you want to get home and check it out a little bit more, but is it annual? Is it perennial? Is it, full sun? Is it shade? Whatever. It's got it. And that's a wonderful thing. Except, sometimes this Plant Snap will very blatantly make a big mistake. Like you take a picture of a rose and it might say it's a honeysuckle or something like that. So
that's pretty off. I have found that the picture of this app is pretty accurate. So that I work with, but
yeah. And it's always interesting to find out those things. I mean, if you're one with nature, there is a lot of questions in your mind that come up, and it's nice to be able to just go after and use things.
Right.
All right. Somebody's telling me that I missed a question from earlier. Uh-oh. Tabby, give it to me again, please. And in the meantime, I want to talk about, where is it? I've got so many questions here. This is good. All right. So, I lost it really well. Okay. She's saying stupid internet wonky. Yeah,
Mercury is retrograde, so communication's really been fun.
Yeah, I know. It's been miserable, kind of. All right, so I'll get her question in a minute, but you offer hands-on techniques, spells and rituals and works of magic of the 4 elements. And as I was going through the info on each element, a question kind of popped into my head. Now, astrologically, my zodiac sign is associated with water.
Yep.
Would that mean that I would have better luck working with water than any of the other elements?
That's a good question. Years ago when I started my, formal practice of witchcraft, I worked with air, and I'm a Gemini, and I am a communicator, and that was really powerful for me. But I have a stronger personal relationship with the element of water. And so, for some people, astrologically, if you don't really know which one do I feel like I am most connected to, then going with your astrological alignment would probably be a smart way to go. But most of us have like a leaning towards something. Like, if you really are into gardening, chances are you want to check out the Earth Witch. I mean, you want to check it all out, but you're going to probably find that maybe you identify more as a Earth Witch. I identify more as a water witch, and interestingly enough, I have no water in my birth chart, none.
Mm.
So I've often thought that was really strange, almost like the water connection that I have is my completion or my, because it's missing in my chart. I don't know.
Well, also missing in your chart, but sometimes maybe this goes back to, those who believe in reincarnation, things that have happened in previous lives that you carried with you from, you could have been a mermaid or something, you know what I'm saying?
I've had a lot of, that was something that actually brought this book about, was that I had a tremendous experience with the spirit of water when I was in Shasta. And one of the things that the spirit of water did was show me all these different experiences I had had with honoring water, not just in this lifetime, but in other lifetimes. But also, I almost drowned when I was 12. So it was a really profound moment for me.
Yeah.
I was drowned in the Ammonoosuc River by the Mount Washington. And, I wrote about it in my first book, but that was before I had the experience with the spirit of water in Shasta. And what the spirit of water showed me was that when I was outside of my body in that moment, which I do remember, that the spirit of water had entered my body and basically kept me from drowning until my father could get to me. So it was a really powerful experience. I mean, that if you've read it or people do read it in my book, it was a tremendous experience where when I could open my eyes in between these emotional waves of knowledge coming my way, I had a group of 8 people standing around me with their hands like directed at me, sending me energy because I was in such a huge spiritual experience.
Were those spirits or were those elementals or who were they?
It was, I would say it would be an elemental being that I had. The people were actually, that had their hands up were real people. Mm-hmm. I was with a group of people, of physical beings. But I had an experience with the elemental spirit of water, and it was huge. And Mount Shasta is a really powerful place to begin with. Yeah. And it actually brought about this book. So I had that experience, which I don't want to give it away because it is a big part of my book, or I do talk about it in the book. By communicating with the spirit of water. And then I came back from that trip, and every time I was working on somebody doing healing work, I would suddenly find that I was asking the water in their body to help balance itself, like really thinking about the water as being conscious. And I started, studying structured water. And then all of a sudden I was really experienced like having this understanding of how to attune the water. So there's 4 attunements in the book. So one for each of the elements, and how they came were really powerful, each and every one of them. So they're pretty awesome. I've got a chance. Last year I did 4 elemental retreats here on my property and got a chance to really try those things out on other people. And I had a little bit the year before when I was writing the book, but last year was when I was really in practice with it.
Yeah, I was actually looking at your website, and I saw the video of
the water attunement.
The water, yeah. I mean, that was beautiful.
Yeah. It's a really amazing space, too, that video was taken from. So
it was very peaceful and very calm, but you could feel it when you watch it. Well, I did anyway. I mean, a
lot of people do. So it's like there is something coming from it. Thank you for noticing.
Yeah. Okay, I got the question that I lost before. So let's get to that. She says, I'm an earth sign. Is that why when I encountered a water elemental that it felt it could not relate to me? I was actually put off by it and almost afraid of it.
Okay. So that's, I actually talk about that a lot in my book, and elemental beings, nature beings, are in many ways no different than humans in the sense that they're not all the same. And I tell people that some people neighbors want you to come right into their house. Some neighbors want to talk to you from the yard. Some neighbors don't really want to encounter you. Those could be the reasons why you felt put off by it, or like it was a little intimidating to you. But the other thing is that, and I talk about this a lot in the book, is that we don't have the same rules of engagement. So it's really important when we're engaging with elemental beings to explain things. Like, I always tell elemental beings, like, hey, I can't breathe underwater. Like just as like a heads up. And, so what you might encounter if you have that where it's intimidating to you, what I normally tell people to do is to stop there, to don't go any further that day. And if you want to develop a relationship with that water spirit, keep going back and visiting that spot before you feel like you're welcome to go any further, and you can leave offerings there. You can just sit and meditate there and see if anything comes to you. Like, give them a chance to read you as well, because you got to think about it this way. Like, you're intruding on their neighborhood. You're walking into their land, their water, their space. And if you introduce yourself and you sit and you let them kind of like read you, that's one of the things I teach people to do in the book as well, is to allow yourself to be open to be read. Then those beings can see that you aren't coming meaning harm, that you're not coming. They'll understand a little bit more about you.
Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing that some of them are friendlier than others, so you kind of have to watch your P's and Q's sometimes, don't you?
Exactly. You have to think about, just like human beings, like one of the biggest mistakes that people make engaging in the unseen world is either A, being so afraid that they are giving away their power, or B, the other one being that they think that every being is like love and light. And it would be like walking into, a town you didn't know and assuming that everybody was love and light and that everybody wanted to be your friend.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are grumpy. Some people don't give a shit about making connections with other people. Some people are really friendly. So you do have to feel it out. You have to say, sure, like, okay, this feels good or this doesn't feel good. If it doesn't feel good, don't do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, she just commented in chat room and she said, makes sense, like I would with a ghost. Introduce myself and let them know that I'm not there to harm and being respectful. And thank you for the answer. Yes,
that's a very good, I've taught spirit communication with the beloved dead for many years because I work as a medium as well. And a lot of the same kind of like rules of engagement that you would use for talking to the dead, you want to use for working with elemental spirits. You want to be clear. You want to be, I say, clarity and love, should be kind of motivating things.
Yeah. All right. We've got 2 minutes to the break, but there's another quick question I think you can answer from the chat. Can you use earth magic or whatever to create physical manifestations from nothing?
The short answer would be yes, and that it would. The long answer would be it would really depend on what you were trying to manifest.
Or who, maybe, huh?
Oh, right. But if you're talking about, using earth magic to call a lover to you, I used crows, not so much for a lover, but I used crows for years to bring business to myself. I would ask the crows to go tell people who needed me about me. Not for me to just get anybody, but if I could help somebody, have them hear my name. And I cannot tell you how many people have come to see me and told me that they were going through a lot and they kept seeing a bunch of crows and they knew they had to reach out to me.
I love crows. I really do. We have a whole lot of them in the backyard, and they come and they bathe and they, make a lot of noise, and it's lovely to have them there.
They definitely chat a lot, so they're good at spreading your word.
Yes, they are, and that's part of the charm of them, I think.
Yes.
All right. Well, within each elemental teaching, there are a series of progressive lessons, and each one has a personal story. Now, we're going to take a short break, because we have to. But when we come back, I'd really like to hear about your journey to Merlin's Cave in the UK. Can we do that?
Yes.
All right. So everybody, just sit tight, and we'll be back in about 2 minutes.
These important messages. Missed an episode of Stirring the Cauldron? Then be sure to check out marlabrooks.com and check out the archive. And while you're there, check out Marla's weekly Witches Oracle card reading. Explore the site to find many great resources, such as information on tarot, oracle readings, metaphysical consultations, and links to all of Marla's books. That's marlabrooks.com.
I was in the hospital with my son for 18 months.
When he got injured, I wasn't prepared, but I knew I had to be strong.
When I was told about John's injury, I was in complete shock. I just remember rushing into his room and giving him a big hug and letting him know I was there.
These veterans and families are just a few of the heroes we serve at Homes for Our Troops. For thousands of severely injured veterans, everyday life is filled with barriers.
It was really the little things throughout the house. Counters that you can't roll up to.
I had to drag my wheelchair down steps.
I want to help, but he is so determined.
At Homes for Our Troops, we build specially adapted custom homes with features like wheelchair access, roll-in showers, and automatic door openers that allow them to function independently and focus on their recovery and family.
This house is freedom.
It's hope. It's a new beginning.
This house has given me my family back.
To learn more, visit hfotusa.org.
New Aeon Now. News and discussion of the metaphysical, the occult, the paranormal, and much, much more. With your hosts, New Aeon High Priestess Reverend Lily Alley, head of the Draken chapter of the Order of Paranormal Exploration, Christine Matza. The New Aeon is now. Join us every Thursday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for New Aeon Now.
Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
And my guest tonight is Salicrow, and we're talking about her book, The Path of Elemental Witchcraft. And as I mentioned before the break, I'd like to hear about your journey to Merlin's cave in Cornwall, because you said that it had an otherworldly quality, and being a psychic medium, your senses must have been on red alert, huh?
Well, I've actually been to Merlin's cave a couple of times. And it is a really amazing. First of all, I love caves, and it's a sea cave, which means that you can only go into it during low tide, because at high tide it fills with water. And above the cave is the castle of Tintagel. So if people are unfamiliar with Tintagel Castle, it was believed to be the castle that King Arthur's mother lived in, and that Morgan Le Fay was also born there. So a lot of Arthurian legend happens in Tintagel. And so it's a really cool place, though, because there is a castle, or the ruins of a castle on top of it. And it is a very large cave. The first time I went, I didn't get to spend as much time there. But the second time I went, I was there for quite a while. And you can feel the essence of magic there, many elemental beings. And I love to do sacred singing. So I was doing that inside of Merlin's cave, and the last time I went, and feeling spirit join me, which happens a lot when I'm doing sacred sound or sacred toning. And the cool part is that one of the guys who was on the trip with me caught a series of photos in which you could see this purple light, like a violet light, that was moving toward me. And in the last picture, it was like right around my heart chakra. And now I've seen that violet light since then. It's very much connected to the spirit of water. I have had a lot of times when I'm doing water attunements where you'll see this almost ultraviolet light that settles on the water or just above it, which is really cool. So yeah, it's a pretty intense place. I recommend anybody who has the opportunity to go there to do so.
So as a medium, did you pick up any spirits, any people spirits there?
Not as many people spirits. I felt more of that in places like I've been inside the West Kennet Longborough which is closer to Avebury, and other places there. But really, I don't think that there's a lot of ancestral dead that hang out in the sea cave, because nobody would have actually lived inside that cave. So when they talk about that Merlin could have lived there, he would have gone there to do shamanic work, and that's really kind of what you feel there. You know, that term shamanic is a little bit overused, but Druids practiced a form of that was very similar. It's not really, traditional shamanism in the way that people think of it, but similar. Still entering into that dream state, still working with the elements of, nature, still working with divination and all of that kind of stuff. And Merlin's Cave is a place where you can go to enter deep into yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm like you. I love caves too. We don't have too many out here. Well, we do, but they're harder to find sometimes.
Yeah, well, I've been up into caves up in Shasta, into like their old lava tubes.
Yeah, that's up north. I'm down south, and we've got
south. You got a long drive.
We've got beaches, not caves. Yeah, it would be a long drive, but they're wonderful anyway. All right, so here I'm a big proponent of altars for all things. I think everybody needs one, at least one. Mm-hmm. And for all the elements, this is something that you talk about in the book, how to build an elemental altar and customize the ceremonies and rituals. So how important, first of all, is it, do you think, that we should have our own altars? And maybe you can explain what types of things might be appropriate for the elemental altars.
Sure. Well, altars are addictive, and what happens is usually you start out with a altar, and then you have another couple altars, and then you have a couple more altars.
Yes.
And then they're everywhere. And also what I found is that most people have altars and don't realize that they do. When I start explaining it or going to people's houses, I will find that there are places that they put their sacred things. And the easiest altar I usually instruct people to make is an ancestor altar, because I am a medium, and a lot of my clients don't identify as being witches. I have a lot of everyday people and I can get them to do altars too, because I start them with ancestor altars. Mm-hmm. So pictures of your dead, items of memorabilia that make you think of your beloved dead. That's probably the easiest starting altar. And it doesn't even have to be just your dead. You can also put your living family members on it. But the big key to an altar is that you don't put anything there happenstance. You don't throw your keys on the altar unless you have car problems and you're really wanting some extra energy toward your car. Elemental altars, I have about 16 and a half acres of land where I live, and I've built temples all over my land, especially since the pandemic. Mm-hmm. As soon as the pandemic hit, it was like crazy, the building that went on here. But I tell people, like, a tree makes a great air altar. Excuse me. Because trees, for example, air is the element that doesn't have any physical form of its own. Water has a physical form of its own. Fire has a physical form of its own. Earth has a physical form of its own. Air does not. And so air really I think trees make great air altars, because you can do things like hang wind chimes on them, or ribbons. You can, use it to meditate in front of, to interact with an air elemental, because air elementals, as a general rule, can be very playful, and the sylph are. And so, having things for them to play with, like pinwheels or whirligigs of some kind. I like wind chimes a lot. So, and I like to hang mirrors. I have a lot of reflective things that aren't really there for people to gaze at themselves, but for them to be able to maybe gaze into the other world.
And they're good for protection too, sending back negative energy.
Exactly. One of the things I tell people to do with their earth altar, particularly if they have the ability to have these outside, is to collect soil from the four corners of their property. Doesn't matter how big your property is, and my property is pretty big, so I don't literally do the four corners of my property. I go into the woods in each of the directions. And then to put that on your altar when you first establish your earth altar, to cover it with dirt from the different places on your land. And if you can, to leave it for a full moon cycle, so like a 28-day cycle. If not, to leave it, for a 3-day full moon cycle. But that helps to create a connection to your land and that earth altar. I have a water altar. My water altar is, I have outside water altars, but I also have water altar in my bathroom because I'm a big tub witch.
Okay.
So, you can just start being creative. I think if you heat with wood or any kind, or have a wood stove in your home, I mean, you probably don't because you live in California. I live in northern Vermont. I have a wood stove as a heat source. And I often use my wood stove when it's not in use as an altar. So that is a place that I'm giving honor to something that then gets used to heat my house. So you can combine all of the elements into one altar. But like I said, altars are a little addictive. If you really get into the elemental magic, you're probably going to find that you are wanting to build altars in different places on your property or in your home.
Mm-hmm. And I particularly love the tree, with the air, because you can put, like you said, ribbons, but you can also put messages up there, like the cloudies, and it's just, there's so many things around us that we don't notice, we take it for granted, and as you said, be creative, inside, outside, because there's always a way to do something, and there's no right or wrong. It's what you feel, right?
Right. And when I started, I have 2 apple trees that I kind of use, one as my cloudy tree and one as my air altar. Mm-hmm. And they are the most, they produce the most apples of any of the apple trees on my property.
Well, we're doing that, and you're getting used to the plant spirits too, and you talk to the trees and you use them, and they
produce more because they're being honored, because they're being thanked. Like this, we can do this with our house plants. Like if you don't have a lot of property or any property, you could have an earth altar near your house plants, or if you've got a window box, your altar doesn't have to be huge. It could be a small thing. Your altar could be created with crystals as well for an earth altar. And that one you can get away with. Gosh, you could have crystals on your desk at any office job or school teacher job, and they just think they're pretty. So you can actually hide your altar in plain sight.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways. And again, in the book, there are so many things out in the book that you don't think about, but you go, wow, yeah, okay, this is good. I mean, it's chock full of really good things. Let me see. Okay, in the fire section, you explain a type of divination that I'm not familiar with, or I wasn't until I read it. I'd like to hear some more about it. It was spotomancy.
And that is the one of looking at, I'm sorry, I've been out, but spotomancy is looking at ash and soot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting thing. I grew up where, so my parents had parties all the time. My parents were hippies, and sometimes we'd have huge bonfires. And I remember being a kid and going out and examining the coals and the ash and stuff in the morning and looking for treasures because, they would melt bottles in it or whatever and make cool things. And spudomancy kind of makes me think of that. But what you actually can do is, it's great to do if you are doing spell work, and to check the remains. And there's a couple ways you can do it. You can do it right that moment, like burn it and see what the remains look like. Or you can put your ash out on like a table and leave it and come back the next day to see if there's any symbols or signs in the ash the following day. So I try to make them really practical and make it so that divination becomes something that you're doing every day, and in ways that don't involve you having to pull out tools all the time, but learning to actually just read your landscape. I practice spudomancy in a very simple term when it comes to if I'm doing any kind of spell and I'm burning something, which I like to do a lot. What pieces of it don't burn is important to examine. And if there are remains left over, do those remains make any, symbols? Do they make any signs that you recognize?
Like reading tea leaves, in a sense.
Yeah. That's the thing about divination. So I started, when I was 18, I started reading the tarot. And now I've read so many different forms of things like tea leaves, coffee grounds, ashes, wax, water, oil, mirrors, crystal balls. Because once you start learning how to do divination, it's really just a matter of learning a different tool. It's not really learning a different skill. It's just a different way of getting there. It's the same thing with communication. So people who can communicate, I first learned to communicate with ancestral spirits. My sister, I think, learned first more with plants because, she was a wilder child than I was. And my grandmother used to tell her to go out into the yard and find something she could eat. And so she was learning to listen to the plants and then bring it into my grandmother. My grandmother would tell her if she found something was she right? Did she find something that was edible or not? Where I was more, I was more suitable for the parlor. Like I could sit and be quiet and observe. And I got to do a lot more of that kind of stuff because of that.
Yeah. Also, when you're reading the ashes and stuff, do you also read some of the embers that go along, or they just have to be pure ash?
Well, I think any of that is really like a matter of what you're called to. I say read everything, like if there's embers that are still cooking and you want to look at that, you can do that as well. Everything that's in the book is really just giving you suggestions on how to do it, but we all really get there a little bit different than each other, So if, you feel like you wanted to work with the embers, you definitely can.
Yeah, and that's the other thing about the book, and you mentioned that you're not preaching. You are just suggesting and sharing the way you've gone through things. And so it's open, it's open-minded. And in magic in general, you do it your way. There are certain paths you follow, but you still do it your way. So people think, well, maybe I'm doing this right. Maybe I'm doing this wrong. I don't know. Well, trust your gut, right?
Right. And I really like to personally, I've taught for many years. I've been teaching since I was about 30. And so about 20 years of teaching regularly. And what I find is that, I prefer to teach techniques because types of witchcraft are almost like religion, and there's so many, like that you could have studied under this teaching and that teaching, and you can be a Christian witch, you can be a, Gardanian witch, you can be a, whatever. There's so many different types and schools of witchcraft that a person can study, but I try to just stick to the techniques, and that way, however you want to get there is up to you. If you want to get there by following a very, a very stepped system in which you have to be initiated and you move from one point to the other because somebody else tells you you're ready, there's nothing wrong with that. but this book would also help you even if you were doing that, because it actually just teaches you the techniques of like how to read and how to listen and how to do the actual actions.
Well, and I want to mention too that, people are thinking, well, I'm not a witch, I don't need to read the book or something. It's not all about witchcraft in the sense that everybody has a little witchcraft in them, they just don't realize it. And, I think anybody that is metaphysically into that kind of thing, it's the same thing. Do it.
It's not even released yet, but my book has been since it got pre-order released, has been in the top 100 for books on Druidry. And right now I think it's like 30 or something like that. And it's not even out yet. Because there's a lot of things about it that are really, I'm a Druid too. I married the earth in Stonehenge. I did a 3-year training in Druidry. I have a really sacred relationship with the earth. Mm-hmm. But in truth, it's like, I'm a person who talks to the dead. I'm a person who sees into the unseen world. Those two things right there, those were like two of the the top things if you want to like accuse somebody of being a witch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, point that finger, right?
Right. And also the word witch really means wise one. And I like to think that I'm a good example of what it means to be a witch. I was on a school board for 9 years. I'm pretty normal. I've been married to I've been with the same guy for 32 years. I'm not separate from my community. Mm-hmm. I'm very much a part of my community. And I think witches can be a part of their community.
Sure. It's a title. It's just who we are, but some people just take it the wrong way sometimes. You never know.
It is true. I live in a very liberal state, as you do. There's a little bit more leeway to call yourself a witch in Vermont than there is in Nebraska.
I'm not afraid to wear my pentagram,
Exactly.
Yeah, but I take it off at certain times. We all have to do that, but whatever.
Right.
One quick question, chat room. Is this a book that beginners in the craft can easily use?
Yes. I actually designed it to be easily acceptable for beginners, but to have enough information in it that people who've been practicing for a while are still going to get quite a bit out of it. So it's one of the reasons why I recommend that it's actually read from the beginning to the end, because the techniques stack on each other, which means things that I'm introducing you to in the beginning of the book are necessary to help you do some of the things further on in the book.
And there are so many techniques, so many. I just, I've got to read it again, because you miss it.
You've already got a stain on it, so, you're happy there.
I know. I felt blessed once I read your comment. Instead of thinking, I ruined the book. No, it was okay.
You're just bringing it in.
I was, and it was delicious, as is the book. So in the time we have left, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes. Let's talk about your website and the various things that can be found there, like psychic readings, spirit sessions, healing, upcoming events, spirit gallery, and your elemental witchcraft retreat.
Yeah, so I'm a really prolific person. I do readings, and I do psychic readings, past life readings, soul level readings, and I do individual spirit communication and groups. And I do that on Tuesdays and Fridays. So 2 days a week, most weeks I'm dedicated to seeing clients. And I do that both in person here at my home at Solstice Meadow in Vermont, and also online through Zoom. So those are ways that people, if you just go to my services, you can get information on all of them. And I actually have a write-up on my Facebook page pinned to the top of my Salicrow Psychic Medium page that tells you in detail about the different kinds of readings that I do and where you'd want to start. And that doesn't cover the spirit communication bit, but I am a very detailed psychic medium. That's how I my first book, Jump Girl, The Initiation and Art of a Spirit Speaker, was about growing up as a psychic and medium. And I see myself as a healer. So I've even had other mediums send people to me because I will go in deep detail with conversations with the dead. And I often end up working with whole families over and over again, and even sometimes ending up going into doing actual work on healing. And my third book that comes out next year is called Spirit Speaker, A Medium's Guide to Death and Dying. So that book's already written, but doesn't come out until next summer. So I definitely, those are my things you can find there. My spirit galleries, I do 5 every summer that's on the land here. And those are also teaching galleries. So they're places where people who are learning spirit communication can get some practice, because I will focus everybody else in on what I'm focusing on. Mm-hmm. And then I have my elemental witchcraft retreat that's coming up. It's July 9th and 10th. And that is a 2-day, 1-night retreat here at Solstice Meadow in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. And in it, I share all 4 attunements from the book. So while you can self-attune by using the attunements in the book, it is always a lot more and kind of like intense to be able to get the attunement from another person. So that's a big part of it. But I also teach people about how we'll make different altars for the elements. We will be using some of the divination tool skills and the communication skills. And I have some pretty amazing earth altars on my property. I have a 13-foot stone spiral that has a copper underlying kind of like web underneath it, that's made out of white quartz. I have a white quartz like mound in my backwoods that has a fairy well, and it has actually got like this chair made out of white quartz that you can sit in that's pretty groovy. Wow. And I have a moss spa, and I have different places in the woods that have been dedicated to working with different elemental beings. And because I have some knowledge of geomancy and druidry, and my druid teacher was a prolific stone circle builder. So I have a lot of earth altars that are like, they have their own technology.
You've been blessed. You've really been blessed. Before we go, give them the website.
Sure.
Where can they find you?
They can find me at salicrow.com, and it's SALICROW, like the bird, salicrow.com. And you can find my book, should be released. It is being released on May 31st through all of the major booksellers.
Okay, and when your next book comes out, why don't you give me a call and come back?
Sounds great. So that'll be about a year from now. And thank you very much for having me, Marla. This has been fun.
Well, thank you for joining us. And let's thank everybody for listening in. And until next time, everybody, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more fun. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2009.
You have been listening to the Para X Radio Network.